Good day and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our Healthcare Summit, our virtual event that we are having to cover a number of different topics, both at a high level to talk much more about strategy and everything we're seeing across the landscape, as well as a track to focus on much more of a technical deep dive. I'm David Henshall. I'm the CITRIX CEO. I've been part of this organization now for over 18 years. So I've seen a lot of our evolution, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm going to provide an update on the company's strategic direction and recognizing that we're operating from a different level of familiarity across the audience. I'll try to keep this at a relatively high level and let our teams focus in much more detail as we go forward into the individual segments. But I'd like to start, as I always do, to just step back and take a moment to say thank you. Thank you, of course, for joining us today. Thank you to all of you that have been CITRIX customers and partners for all these years. And I think as we all step back, recognizing that 2020 is not the year that any of us really would have anticipated, but I'm very proud of the work that the CITRIX organization has done with many of you and your organizations to ensure the safety of your teams, continuity of critical business operations, and the support of the communities, of course, in which we all live and work. The COVID pandemic has created such hardship for so many around the world, while at the same time, I think it's really highlighted the incredible work that is performed on a daily basis by healthcare professionals. So really on behalf of CITRIX, and of course, all the 10,000 families that are Citrites around the world, we're very, very thankful for everything you do. So thank you so much. So changing gears here and stepping back, when you look at Citrix, what you see on this slide is actually covers of our annual reports over a long period of time. The point here is talking a little about continuity, because for 30 years, we have been focused really with a singular goal in mind. And that goal is about connecting people and work resources so that they can do their best work. And from the earliest days, we called that things like remote access. And obviously that's transitioned a lot because along the way, we've also been driving this public discussion around the idea of the future of work and recognizing, of course, that, work is something that is always changing. It's a moving target and it continues to expand very, very differently, supported in many ways by just changing demographics around the globe, changing technology opportunities and landscape, and of course, the ever dynamic business conditions that we all operate within. And so to support that, we've continued to evolve our own solutions, really to focus on helping you deliver on both the realities of today, the challenges that you're facing, and of course, what's coming in the future as technology requirements, of course, and architectures, continue to evolve. We've been really fortunate to create and lead core categories like virtualization and application delivery. And then over the last several years, really pioneering a new market category, which we all describe as the integrated digital workspace. And throughout that period of time, many of you have trusted Citrix to handle your most mission-critical workloads, mission-critical applications, and really innovative apps that drive success across your business. That's everything, of course, from sophisticated, trading applications to give investors an edge to electronic medical records that allow clinicians to provide the best patient experience while still managing all of the requirements around security and compliance, and of course, thousands and thousands of others. And in recent years, we've expanded the portfolio pretty dramatically and across our leadership in these areas to really build and also acquire capabilities that further improve employee experience, employee productivity and engagement, and advance security outside of this idea of virtualization to a much broader array of SaaS, web, and mobile applications in addition to that. So when you step back and you think about where we are today, Citrix is a global organization, obviously. We have more than 100,000 major enterprise customers around the world and about 400,000 total customers. We operate with a broad partner network, about 10,000 technical partners, both at the application layer, the service layer, infrastructure layer, and many others. We're operating in roughly 100 countries with about 10,000 Citrites also around the globe supporting that. We're fortunate enough to work with roughly 99% of all Fortune 500 companies. And so when I look at it in that lens, we're also very, very thankful that this has allowed Citrix to continue to deliver record results largely each and every year, including 2020. Largely as a result of this multi-year business transformation that we've been executing on, with a large majority of our growth, our innovation, and our focus coming from the idea of an integrated cloud platform strategy and a set of services that extend and complement the traditional solutions in which many of you are familiar, many of you have worked with us over this period of time. And so with this, when we step back and we think about the applicability of the solutions in our customer base, we're fortunate enough to work with most medium and large businesses around the world, including, of course, many of you. Our technologies in general are fundamentally horizontal in nature, and they support all these major market segments, with our primary verticalization coming around healthcare, followed by financial services and public sector, probably the next largest in terms of scale. And of course, working with customers across all of these industries, really securely deliver business apps and content, gives us great insights, insights into those areas that are applicable across industries as we think, vertically around the world, but also leveraging those learnings to share best practices across, individual customer bases, where appropriate on an industry vertical, as well as areas that influence our product roadmap going forward. So it's a lot of what we do is focused on customer back and leveraging those learnings, of course, to continue to drive this innovation forward and expand the portfolio. The conversations we're having, regardless of which industry you're in, are actually relatively straightforward. And so the breadth of the platform, provides customers with an infrastructure to drive and align against a number of, primary business initiatives. A few examples here, of course, on this chart are actually quite common, and I'm sure they resonate with really everyone listening here. Of course, security and compliance is front and center. Security for your data, for your applications, for your devices, regardless of whether those are employee-owned devices, managed or unmanaged devices. Cost savings and security, of course, is always a theme that permeates a lot of what we do. And we're achieving this by, simplifying IT infrastructure for delivery, significantly increasing the speed of transformation, of course, reducing hardware, device, maintenance expenses, and many of these other areas. And, when I talk about that, it's really about removing complexity. For years, I've described the data center in most organizations as a bit of an archaeological dig. And what I've meant by that is that, as an industry, I think we've been very good at acquiring new technologies, adding new things on top. But I think we'd all recognize that what that does is create a level of complexity that over time adds to cost, it slows us down, and it keeps us from moving forward. That's why business agility, again, is one of those core attributes that we really enable across the board. It's really this flexibility to adapt your infrastructure and your workforce, of course, in a much more rapid fashion. For example, we saw about a year ago, of course, that the early stage of the pandemic, companies around the world were rushing to support employees working from home, within a very, very short period of time. And those with a digital workspace strategy, of course, one that had already been put in place, especially those leveraging CITRIX Cloud, reported the ability to support this at scale in just a really, really short period of time, with limited or no impact on their overall productivity or their ability to engage. And when we take that further, this idea of employee productivity, of course, being one of those major business challenges that a lot of organizations are trying to drive, it goes well beyond agility benefits, of course, and really how CITRIX Workspace modernizes the experience of enterprise IT, and doing that for all users by giving them consistent access across all locations, all devices, for all the resources they need, of course, to be productive and engaged. And that's true whether those resources are delivered virtually, whether those are via SaaS, web, or as native applications actually running on an endpoint device. So what I'd like to do is actually highlight a couple of very specific examples over the course of this last year. The first one is Gloucestershire Hospital Trust in the UK. And this is probably a story that's very familiar to many of you, that when COVID hit, in this case, the government mandated that the trust had to move their entire staff and patient clinics off of the main hospital site. It's, again, very common, and it's the same type of challenges. And in this case, what they had to do was move very quickly to enable over 2,000 employees to work from home. And of course, continue providing those essential services and support and be fully up and running in under 48 hours. It's a lot of constraints right out of the gate. We obviously saw a number of different approaches by businesses around the world to execute, similar moves last spring. And some were clearly much more successful than others in terms of the outcomes, in terms of the cost, in terms of sustainability, of course. In this case, while a lot of hospitals in the same situation were rushing to procure hundreds or thousands of new laptops or endpoint devices, I think we'd all recognize that, once that is achieved, if at all possible in this case, then you go through the process of setup, imaging, shipping, et cetera, just to support these teams. The trust in this example took a different approach, and they leveraged their Citrix infrastructure to support everyone's personal home PCs, really taking into account the challenges of security and manageability when working with all of the confidential patient data that, of course, they're subject to. All this allowed the trust to really support patient administration services that really to this day are still operating remotely, leveraging a virtual workspace infrastructure on the devices of their own personal choice, Macs, PCs, and others. Another great example is Mass General Brigham. This is the largest private network in Massachusetts and a longtime Citrix partner. We've been working together on this journey for actually many years, and it started with simply focus on delivering EMR in a secure, managed way. We moved to provide a great mobility infrastructure for their really the entire practitioners and their staff, and then ultimately leveraging technology to reimagine the clinician experience. And the idea, of course, is how do we maximize efficiency of their time with patients, allowing them to do what they do best. During the COVID crisis, this infrastructure model that we put in place, I think was tested in a few really interesting areas. Think about some of the statistics in this case. They went from 9,000 virtual patient visits a month to over 1 million in just a couple of months. It's an increase of about 100x. At the same time, they're required to build out a complete operating hospital within a convention center and complete that in under 5 days. And at the same time, they essentially took their cloud strategy, which had been on the board and anticipated to be a 5-year project, and collapsed that down into a 5-month execution, largely out of necessity, of course. And moving much of the infrastructure to public cloud, really holistically managing the delivery of apps and resources and others that remained on-prem, in cloud, and other resource zones, holistically using the Citrix cloud services. The upside of all this, of course, is that now they're able to shift the focus away from planning all these multi-year projects to really thinking about delivering healthcare in the future. And then, of course, the policies, the tools, and the support that are going to be needed around these brand new revenue models, these brand new engagement models across their entire enterprise. So you're going to hear a lot more from Mass General later. I encourage you to stay in tune and listen in on that segment of the presentation. And these are just a couple of examples, but we're seeing this outcome a lot over the past year, and we're seeing this across a lot of different industries. I think organizations in general are accelerating their move to the cloud during this time, for obvious reasons, to improve agility, to ensure continuity of critical business operations, and really better position themselves to address, all these new types of opportunities, regardless of what industry you're in. These transformation projects that, we've all planned for a long time over many quarters, many years, have been condensed down into such a short period of time. In the case of Mass General, from years down to months. We've even heard them down to weeks. And the results in many cases have far exceeded expectation because they've had to rethink everything from stakeholder engagement to new revenue models, just the way we operate and communicate, like in the case of Mass General. So I think businesses in general are now understanding that hybrid and multi-cloud adoption really enables this greater flexibility of operations and infrastructure while helping them simplify a lot of this complexity that exists in enterprise IT. And of course, those that make the change, stand a better chance of being able to put these resources where they're needed on demand to be able to take advantage of new business opportunities in a changing environment. I think at the same time, though, we'd all agree that the way that we work has fundamentally changed. And it's not going to go back to the way it was before because many of the forces that have been driving this have been building up for years. You may have heard me talk about this in other forums because it's been something that has been important to Citrix to drive against this eventuality and provide the level of infrastructure to make this happen. Of course, all of it accelerated tremendously over the course of the pandemic. You take a step back and you think about last spring, we had 45% of the US workforce effectively working from home. 45%, generating about 2/3 of all economic output across this country. And the major aha for a lot of companies was that just how productive and smoothly their teams were operating. In fact, engagement surveys that customers that I talked to, other CEOs that I talked to, whether those are employee sat or engagement levels, they're measured at record levels. And in some companies, it's the first time they've ever been, anywhere close to where they are right now. And a lot of these ahas were the fact that this antiquated management philosophy that we've all operated in for so many years that has connected successful work in terms of hours spent in a physical office environment is really proven to be incorrect in so many different ways. And how we make this shift to think about work less as that location, of course, and much more of, how do we measure output and accomplishments, and the fact that, productivity at the same time, goes up, and it goes up for a lot of, very important reasons. There's a lot of studies out there that also support this notion. There is one that was recognized by the U.S. Office of Management and Budget that concluded that employers that have really good programs that look at hybrid work models, people working in multiple locations, including at home, they save an average of $11,000 per year. And this is primarily due to increased productivity, lower real estate costs, reduced absenteeism and turnover, and then, of course, the better DR and agility benefits that come along with all of those things. However, the one important consideration and thing to keep in mind is that this can't be a discussion about working either in the office or at home. It's really about the realities that work's happening everywhere. And that's in the office, at home, on the road, or really everywhere in between. And that requires a very specific platform of infrastructure to be able to make that whole idea portable so that people can be productive as effectively as they need to be wherever they are. And so a lot of organizations have responded, of course, in a very similar manner. And our research group, along with many others like industry analysts and others, have been studying this pretty aggressively for a year. And here are some of the major themes that have come out of that. And again, there's a lot of consistency. And most of these areas, of course, won't be a surprise to anyone on this call. But as we look forward into the post-pandemic landscape at some point in 2021, I think there's a reality about how all of our priorities are changed and how they're changing and how we're looking at it going forward. And so I think we'd also recognize and agree that these changes are creating a new set of considerations, a new set of constraints that also have to be addressed, at the very same time. So when you look across this list, first there's obviously everybody's looking for, increased agility of their operations, accelerating app modernization, taking those cloud projects, in a much shorter period of time and condensing those down, as we discussed earlier. People are obviously embracing cloud at a much more accelerated pace. And, this, of course, is, increasing the concern about how do we manage security, now that the access and the applications and others are residing outside of our core data centers, outside of our core environments that we already knew how to secure historically. Companies, of course, are formally rethinking this idea of work and the workforce strategies and the work models that support all of that. And you're hearing a lot of people now come out in the news and talk about, what their future plans are going to look like and how they plan on engaging their teams, not just locally, but on a global basis. And supporting this, I think just last week, Gartner came out and they projected that the approaches to work are changing so dramatically that by the 2024 timeframe, 60% of all employees are going to be working remotely, which is an amazing number if you think about it. It's not just a perk anymore or an exception, but really a business standard. And that's putting a premium, of course, on ensuring that these individuals remain productive, that they have a great experience, that they're engaged with the company, as well as the teams in which they operate and how they collaborate together. And so, companies are phasing out a lot of old technologies, like the old remote access technologies that we all put in place, and those scenarios that supported a lot of that, because the level of performance hasn't been able to support this brand new work model. And that's going to require a fundamental rethink across the board for many of these types of things. And of course, each of these can be solved individually. There's a lot of individual technologies, point products out there. But doing it with that approach, of course, creates a high level of both cost and complexity of the solution. Requiring IT to procure all these individual piece parts, deploy and maintain these things independently. We've done a fair bit of work, at CITRIX, looking at the realities of what we've called the cloud mobile era for a number of years, and understanding that with the distribution of applications, the distribution of devices, et cetera, it's harder. It's, of course, more distributed. These services are originating from so many different locations, And the devices now have gone from being completely managed by IT to, a whole set of things that are, BYO, managed devices, unmanaged devices, et cetera. So a broad proliferation of endpoints, of course. And for users, there is a very direct correlation that we've found between their level of engagement and the effectiveness with the tools that they've been given to do their jobs. Too often we've seen companies that make accessing business applications really difficult or just really inefficient. Usually it's security that's driving that. But when you compare that against the consumer technologies that all of us use and enjoy on a daily basis, you're starting to find this big separation happening that's absolutely impacting the output and the productivity of teams. For example, there's a great statistic that has done looked at the ability to just find information, find data, and it concluded that the average person in an office environment spends about 20% of their time just looking for information across different locations, across different applications, and really just wasting time going back and forth between all of these things. 20%, that's a lot when you think about that in the context of, 1 day per week. Our belief, of course, is that there needs to be a much more holistic solution to this problem. Delivering all of these work resources that employee needs to be productive, to be secure, to be empowered, to really do their very, very best work. Our approach to this, of course, is the CITRIX Workspace. And with the idea of really providing a digital workspace solution that gives employees that reliable access to all of those work resources that we've discussed, and allowing them to use those to be productive. This would include everything from virtual desktops, SaaS applications, web applications, mobile apps, of course, and then the content that resides both in cloud and on-premise storage zones. Importantly, the key is to bring this all together in one unified, really consumer-like experience across any device, any network, any location. Now, that's a key to make sure that it is not just bringing the IT resources together, but it's making them better for the end user, making them better than if they were being accessed and operated on an independent basis. So the workspace, of course, embraces a zero trust security model that not only authenticates the user access into the workspace, but is also constantly thinking about monitoring access, the applications, the network behavior, and then dynamically applying these security practices and policies to ensure that corporate information and applications remain very secure, regardless of what scenario the individual is actually working within. The workspace leverages the CITRIX networking portfolio to ensure that an employee's applications are not only accessible, of course, and making that available across all these different scenarios, but they're performing at their very best and making sure that the application itself is optimized and managed and visible as necessary to ensure both the end user's requirements, but obviously the requirements of the IT organization. And increasingly, we've been investing in areas that are making users more productive. The idea of really simplifying work. And over time, you're going to see the workspace infused with more and more intelligence through micro apps, through ML, through AI, and other tools that really personalize the experience for the individuals, that help guide and automate work experiences in a way that remove a lot of the noise and the digital exhaust that exists in a typical workday, so that the people that you're hiring to do their work can be focused on their jobs and focused on what we're actually hiring them to do. So as we go forward in the day, you're going to hear much more about the underlying technologies that power the workspace and how we're bringing these together to support the delivery of all work resources, with the highest level of performance, visibility, and security. And so much of the development focus is really been on a platform orientation inside of Citrix over the last couple of years. And the idea there, of course, is to focus on integration and completeness of the workspace. And that is everything from unifying the onboarding experience for new apps, management, integration of resources, everything that simplifies the management. Additionally, we've instrumented an approach to analytics across the entire portfolio to give a complete view. And that's everything from the device through the applications, the files, the network, increasingly bringing together those points of view for an overall visibility, analytics, but also to drive proactive actions within the workspace infrastructure that enhance security, enhance performance, and the other manageability attributes. So in addition to the platform, in and those things that we're focused on. You also have a number of independent workspace solutions. And those you see on the top here, really facilitating the delivery of resources, whether those are resources being delivered virtually, running on a device, or accessed through solutions like our secure internet access gateway, provides native access to web and SaaS applications with that same level of security and visibility that you've enjoyed over all these years with virtualization. We're executing a similar approach, of course, to our application delivery and security technologies, bringing together these services under a unified management umbrella to make it easier to deploy everything from application security, application access, application delivery requirements, etc. We're also going to highlight later in the day all the deep partnerships that we built and the integrations we built over the years. And the key focus there, I'd say, is on choice. The infrastructure layer, of course, allowing you to have that flexibility to run your workloads wherever it makes most sense for your business, on-prem, in the public cloud, hybrid model, et cetera. And having the ecosystem to tie that all together and bridge that across the board. Doing the same thing for service providers, for application providers, and the ecosystem of your choice. So overall, I'm very excited about the level of innovation that these teams have been able to deliver over the last few years, and then, of course, the direction that we're taking the portfolio. However, let me shift gears for a minute and just say that delivering IT infrastructure, of course, is not the only challenge for supporting distributed employees. How these teams are working and working together effectively is also a big challenge. And so with the pandemic really accelerating this idea of both digitization and the adoption of flexible and hybrid work models, we understand that there's a huge need to be able to address these holistically. And so in January, we announced the acquisition of the company called Reich. Reich is a leading provider of SaaS-based collaborative work management solutions. They provide a core day-to-day productivity platform that provides the tools to really structure, track, report, and collaborate across a whole wide range of different work scenarios. And so together with CITRIX and Reich, we'll be able to deliver a really integrated cloud-native digital workspace experience that really empowers all of these employees as well as teams to securely access, collaborate, and execute work in the most efficient and effective way possible. And we'll do that, of course, across any work channel, any device, any location. And when you look at the types of scenarios and the work that our existing customers are doing, you see a clear overlap with this idea, the broader set of challenges that I've been discussing over the last few minutes. Great partners like eBay are leveraging the workspace to power an entirely new set of work models. They're also tapping into new talent pools around the globe to expand their business. CBS Interactive, another great example where they've been very focused on leveraging automation, micro applications to modernize how their teams are interacting with their systems of records. And this is back to ensuring that the individuals are very engaged, they're operating as effectively as possible, and they're giving those tools to be truly, truly productive. And if you shift and you look over at a traditional Reich customer, and some of the customers that, of course, are shared across the CITRIX ecosystem as well, you're describing similar outcomes, but on much more of a team basis to effectively communicate and collaborate across the team, across the project, with external business partners, and across a number of these scenarios. So when we bring this together, we're really excited about the potential for that unified approach to address both the challenges of distributed IT as well as the challenges of distributed teams. And so we're going to talk a lot more about that over the course of the rest of the day and the solutions as we go forward. So as I wrap up, I'd just like to again say thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your long partnership with Citrix and the trust that you've placed in us to be able to help manage not only the infrastructure for these new and changing work models, but also in the future, being able to help make your teams more engaged, more productive, and more effective.